On a Wednesday morning in June of 2014, a project manager named Daniel Hargrove stood at the edge of a construction site outside Bowling Green, Kentucky, and watched $500,000 sink into the earth one slow inch at a time. The excavator had gone in the previous afternoon. A brand new Caterpillar 390F, 19 months off the assembly line, $520,000 of hydraulic precision and computerized engineering, the largest piece of equipment Hargrove Construction had ever put on a job site. It had broken through what the geotechnical survey had called stable load-bearing ground and dropped into the black bottomless muck beneath like a stone dropped into a well. By Wednesday morning, it was buried past its tracks. The cab was still visible. Barely. Daniel Hargrove was 47 years old, had been running construction projects in south-central Kentucky for 21 years, and had never lost a machine on a job site, not once. He stood at the edge of that swamp in his work boots, with his phone in his hand and his project schedule in his head, and he understood with complete clarity that everything he had built his reputation on was sitting in 4 feet of mud 40 yards in front of him. He had 3 days to get it out before the insurance adjuster arrived. What Daniel Hargrove did not know, what nobody on that job site knew, was that the answer to his problem was parked in a shed on a farm 6 miles down the county road, and that the man who owned it was 87 years old and had been waiting his whole life for someone to need it badly enough to ask. Dale Hutto had farmed the same 380 acres of Warren County ground since 1961. He was born on that land in 1927, the third son of a tobacco farmer who had worked the same ground before him, and he had spent his entire life within a 12-mile radius of the farmhouse where his mother had raised him. He was not a tall man, and he had not been a tall man even when he was young. He stood 5 feet 8 inches in his work boots and had the particular kind of leanness that comes from 8 decades of physical work. Not the leanness of deprivation, but the leanness of use, of a body that had never been asked to carry anything it did not need. He had outlived 2 wives, 3 tractors, 1 barn fire, the tobacco program, and every prediction anyone had ever made about what an old man farming alone could or could not do. And he owned a 1927 Advance Roomley oil pull tractor that his father had bought new for $2,080 in the spring of that same year, the year Dale was born. The machine was 87 years old. So was Dale. He had always found that symmetry satisfying in a way he could not quite put into words. The oil pull had not been built for speed. It had not been built for comfort or convenience or any of the qualities that the modern farming equipment industry spent its considerable marketing budget promoting. It had been built for one thing and one thing only: to pull. It gripped the earth with its massive rear wheels, 4 feet in diameter, lugged with steel cleats that bit into any surface, with the patience and certainty of something that did not know how to quit, and pull until whatever needed moving was moved. Dale's father had used it for 20 years, dragging stumps out of fields being cleared for planting, pulling threshing machines through the bottomland mud that collected along the creek after spring rains, doing the heavy, impossible work that horses could not do and that the lighter gasoline tractors of that era would not attempt. When the oil pull became obsolete in the late 1940s, when the newer, faster diesel machines made it look ancient and inefficient and beside the point, Dale's father had parked it in the shed behind the barn and covered it with a canvas tarp and told Dale to leave it alone. Dale had left it alone until 1987, when he was 60 years old and had enough time and enough money saved to do what he had always meant to do. He spent 2 years restoring it, sourced parts from collectors in Indiana and Ohio, and one remarkable man in rural Saskatchewan who had 3 oil pulls in a shed and knew where to find anything. By 1989, the machine was running. By 1990, Dale was taking it to steam and gas shows across Kentucky and Tennessee, demonstrating it for crowds who had never seen anything like it, answering the questions of engineers and historians and farmers who understood instinctively that they were looking at something that should not still exist but did. He fired it up once a month, every single month for 24 years. Not because he needed to use it, because he believed that machines, like people, go to pieces when they are not asked to do anything. Now let me tell you about the 3 days before Dale Hutto showed up at Daniel Hargrove's job site, because those 3 days are the reason this story gets told. On the first day, Daniel brought in 2 of his company's largest bulldozers, a pair of Caterpillar D9s that together represented more than $800,000 in iron and hydraulics and modern engineering. He chained them both to the stuck excavator with rigging rated for 60 tons and told his operators to pull. The D9s pulled until their own tracks began to slip, until the ground beneath them started to give way, until the chains connecting them to the excavator sang with a tension that made every man on the site take a step back. The excavator did not move. One of the chains snapped at a connecting link, and the recoil took out a section of temporary fencing 30 feet away. Nobody was hurt. The excavator sank another 4 inches. On the second day, Daniel called a heavy equipment recovery company out of Nashville. They arrived with a truck-mounted winch rated for 80 tons, anchored it to a concrete pad 200 feet back from the swamp edge, and ran cable to the stuck machine. The winch screamed. The cable stretched to a diameter visibly thinner than its rated spec. The anchor pad cracked along one edge and began to shift. The excavator moved approximately 8 inches toward solid ground and then stopped. When the winch operator cut power, the excavator settled back 6 of those 8 inches. The recovery company packed their equipment and drove back to Nashville. They left Daniel a bill for $14,000 and a written assessment that used the phrase "beyond practical extraction" 3 times. On the third day, Daniel called a crane company. The crane operator drove out, walked the perimeter of the swamp, tested the ground at 3 points with a probe, and told Daniel that he would not put his crane within 150 feet of that edge. "The ground won't hold me," the operator said. "You want 2 machines stuck instead of 1? He drove away without unloading. Daniel Hargrove stood at the edge of the swamp on Wednesday morning with his phone and his schedule and his ruined survey report, and the complete knowledge that he had exhausted every conventional option available to him within a 3-state radius. His project was 11 days behind. His insurance adjuster was arriving Friday. His reputation for never losing a machine on a job site had ended sometime Tuesday afternoon when nobody was looking. That is when one of his laborers, a 22-year-old named Marcus Webb, who had grown up in Warren County and knew its back roads the way most people know their own neighborhood, said 4 words that changed the day. "You know Dale Hutto?" Daniel looked at him. "No." Marcus Webb looked at the stuck excavator and then back at his boss. "Old man farms down on Rich Pond Road. He's got this old tractor. Like, really old. I've seen him bring it to the county fair. Thing is enormous. My grandfather says it can pull anything." Daniel Hargrove was not a man who believed in folk wisdom or county fair demonstrations or the pulling power of antique farm equipment. He was a man who believed in rated specifications and engineering assessments, and the kind of authority that came with a company letterhead and a professional license. He had just watched a Nashville recovery company with an 80-ton winch fail to move his excavator 8 inches. "How old is this tractor?" Daniel said. Marcus thought about it. "My grandfather says it's as old as Mr. Hutto." Daniel looked at the excavator. He looked at the swamp. He looked at Marcus Webb. "How do I find him?" Daniel said. Dale Hutto answered the phone on the second ring, the way people answer phones when they are not surprised by much anymore and have learned that most things worth doing are worth doing promptly. Daniel explained the situation in the careful, precise language of a man accustomed to writing project reports. The excavator, the weight, the depth, the 3 failed extraction attempts, the Friday deadline. There was a silence on the line that lasted long enough for Daniel to wonder if the connection had dropped. Then Dale said, "I know that swamp. My father cut hay on the field next to it for 30 years. Ground looks solid until you're past your axles, and then it doesn't look like anything at all because you can't see it anymore." Daniel said, "Can you help me?" Another silence. Shorter this time, Dale said. I'll come look at it. I'm not promising anything until I see it myself. But I'll come look. He arrived 40 minutes later in a truck that was older than most of the men on the job site, driving slowly down the access road with the particular unhurried quality of a man who has decided that the destination will be there when he arrives. He was wearing overalls and a canvas work shirt and a hat that had lost its original shape sometime in the previous decade. He was 87 years old, and he moved like a man of 70. Not fast, but deliberate, each step placed with the confidence of someone who has been walking on uncertain ground his entire life and has learned to trust his feet. He stood at the edge of the swamp for a long time without speaking. He looked at the stuck excavator. He looked at the ground between the swamp edge and the machine. He took 3 steps onto the soft ground, felt it with his boot, and stepped back. He looked at where the D9s had been positioned and shook his head slightly at something he didn't explain. Then he turned to Daniel Hargrove. Your bulldozers were in the wrong position, Dale said. You had them pulling straight back. The machine didn't go straight down. It went in on an angle, nose first. You've got to match the angle of extraction to the angle of entry, or you're fighting the suction and the geometry at the same time. No wonder nothing moved it. Daniel stared at him. The Nashville Recovery Company had not mentioned the angle. The oil pull can do this, Dale continued. But I need to come in from the northeast corner, not straight back the way you've been pulling, and I need solid ground under my rear wheels. He pointed to a spot along the swamp edge where a low ridge of gravel subsoil pushed up through the soft surface. Right there. That'll hold me. Daniel looked at the spot. He looked at the 87-year-old man in the worn hat. He thought about the Nashville Recovery Company and their $14,000 bill and their phrase beyond practical extraction. What do you need from me? Daniel said. Just stay out of my way, Dale said, and have somebody ready with a chain. I brought my own, but an extra one won't hurt. Let me tell you about the oil pull's arrival because it is the part of this story that everyone who was there remembers first when they tell it. Years later, in the particular way that people remember things that were genuinely unlike anything they had seen before, Dale went back to his farm and spent 90 minutes firing up the boiler. You could not rush a steam kerosene tractor. The Advanced Roomley oil pull ran on a combination of steam and kerosene, using water injection to cool the combustion and generate the steam pressure that gave the engine its extraordinary low-end torque. It was an engineering solution that had been obsolete for 70 years and had never been improved upon for the specific category of work it was designed to do. You built the fire, you heated the water, you watched the pressure gauge, and you waited. Dale had done it hundreds of times. He did not rush. The machine came down the county road at 4 miles per hour, which was its top speed and also the speed at which it chose to do everything. Daniel heard it before he saw it, a deep, rhythmic exhaust note. Not the sharp mechanical sound of a diesel, but something older and more deliberate, like the breathing of an animal that had learned to pace itself across very long distances. Then it came over the small rise at the entrance to the job site, and every man on that site stopped what he was doing. The oil pull was enormous. Not enormous in the way of modern construction equipment, which achieves its size through hydraulics and reach, and the extension of booms and arms. Enormous in the way of something that is simply, physically, massively present. The rear wheels stood nearly as tall as Dale himself. The lugs on those wheels, cast steel cleats 4 inches deep, were spaced around the circumference like the teeth of something that had decided long ago that it would not slip on any surface the earth could offer. The machine weighed 21 tons. It moved with the unhurried, absolute confidence of something that outweighed everything around it and knew it. Dale guided it to the northeast corner of the swamp, to the gravel ridge he had identified from the edge, and set the brake. The rear wheels sat on solid ground. He climbed down, slowly, carefully, with the particular care of an 87-year-old man who has learned that there is no injury worth the 2 seconds you save by moving faster than you should, and walked to the back of the machine to uncoil his chain. chain was forged steel with links the diameter of a grown man's thumb. It had been in Dale's family as long as the tractor. His father had used it to pull stumps in the 1930s. It had never broken. One of Hargrove's engineers looked at the chain and then looked at Daniel. "That's not rated equipment," the engineer said quietly. "We don't know what that chain will do under load." Daniel watched Dale Hudo walk across the soft ground toward the stuck excavator, chain over one shoulder, 87 years old, moving through the mud with the steady, purposeful pace of a man on his way to do a job he has already done 1,000 times in his mind. "I know what it'll do," Daniel said. Dale hooked the chain to the excavator's frame at the angle he had calculated from the edge. Not straight back, but angled northeast, matching the direction the machine had entered the ground. He tested the connection with his full weight. Then he walked back to the oil pull, climbed up, checked his pressure gauge, and put his hand on the throttle. He looked back once at Daniel Hargrove. Daniel nodded. Dale opened the throttle. The sound the oil pull made under load was not loud in the way of modern equipment under load. It was deep, a resonance that you felt in your chest before you heard it with your ears, the sound of 21 tons of iron and steam committing to a task with everything it had. The drive wheels began to turn. The steel cleats found the gravel ridge beneath them and bit in, each lug pressing down and back with a grip that did not slip, did not spin, did not search for traction, because the traction was already there, already committed, already certain. The chain went tight. In the mud 40 yards away, something groaned. It was not the chain, it was the excavator. $520,000 of modern engineering, buried for 3 days, held by a suction that had defeated 2 D9 bulldozers and an 80-ton winch and a Nashville Recovery Company's professional assessment. That machine groaned in its mud grave and moved 2 inches, then 6, then a foot. One of Daniel's operators said something that was not a word. Several men took steps forward without meaning to, pulled toward what they were watching the way people are pulled toward things they cannot fully believe. Dale did not look back. He watched his pressure gauge. He kept the throttle steady. The oil pull did not hurry. It simply pulled, the absolute unhurried certainty of a machine that had been designed for exactly this, the long, slow, inexorable application of force to a problem that required patience more than speed. 3 feet, 8 feet, 15 feet. The mud released the excavator with a sound that the men on that site would describe differently for years afterward. A groan, a pop, a sucking collapse, a sound like the earth changing its mind. The tracks emerged from the swamp, black and dripping. The machine rolled forward onto solid ground, pulled by a chain attached to a tractor that had been built the same year that Charles Lindbergh crossed the Atlantic. Dale closed the throttle, set the brake, let out the steam whistle once, a single note that crossed the Warren County fields and faded toward the tree line in the particular way that steam whistles fade, like something announcing itself and then deciding it has said enough. Every man on that job site was making noise. Every man except Daniel Hargrove, who stood completely still at the edge of the swamp and looked at his excavator sitting on solid ground, and did not say anything for a long time. Dale climbed down from the oil pull and walked over to unhook his chain. He coiled it carefully and carried it back to the machine. Then he walked over to where Daniel was standing. Daniel looked at him. He looked at the oil pull. He looked at the excavator. He was a man who had spent 21 years building his understanding of what equipment could and could not do, and he was looking at the evidence that his understanding had a significant gap in it. "What do I owe you?" Daniel said. Dale thought about it for a moment. "There's a historical preservation society over in Smith's Grove, trying to keep the old steam and gas equipment documented. They could use some help." Daniel Hargrove wrote a check for $15,000 to the Barren River Area Preservation Society that afternoon, standing at the tailgate of Dale Hudo's old truck with a pen he borrowed from his site foreman. It was the best money he had ever spent. He had been quoted $14,000 by the Nashville company for a failed extraction. He paid $15,000 for a successful one. Dale folded the check once and put it in his shirt pocket. He shook Daniel's hand. He climbed into his truck and drove back down the county road toward his farm, moving at the same unhurried pace at which he did everything, the oil pull following behind on a flatbed that one of Daniel's crew had brought around from the equipment yard. Daniel watched him go. Then he turned back to his job site, his schedule, his recovered excavator, and the work that was waiting. Let me tell you where this story ends, because it does not end at the swamp. Dale Hutto farmed his 380 acres until 2019, when he was 92 years old and his son finally convinced him that the ground would still be there in the spring even if Dale was not the one planting it. He did not stop farming because he had to. He stopped because he decided it was time, which is a different thing entirely, and a distinction Dale Hutto would have considered important. The oil pull is still on the farm. Dale's grandson, a 31-year-old named Carter Hutto who came back to the family ground after 6 years working in Louisville, fires it up once a month, every single month. Not because anyone needs it for anything specific, because Dale told him, in the particular direct way that Dale told people things, that a machine asked to do nothing eventually forgets how to do something. And because Carter was there on the day they brought the oil pull home from the Bowling Green job site and watched his grandfather climb down from the platform with mud on his boots and a check in his shirt pocket, and understood without needing to be told that he was looking at something worth keeping. Daniel Hargrove still runs his construction company. He has not lost a machine on a job site since June of 2014, which is a record he is careful about and does not take for granted. He added one item to his project preparation checklist after the Bowling Green job, a line that his project managers sometimes ask about and that he always takes the time to explain. The line reads, "Know your neighbors." So, let me leave you with this, because this story was never really about a stuck excavator. It was about what happens when everything modern and credentialed and expensive has failed, and the answer turns out to be sitting in a shed 6 miles down the road under a canvas tarp, being fired up once a month by an 87-year-old man who understood something that the engineers with their ratings and their assessments and their phrases, like beyond practical extraction, had not considered. The oil pull was not better than the D9 bulldozers in every way. It was slower, it was harder to start. It required more attention and more knowledge and more patience than any piece of modern equipment on that job site. But it was built for a specific kind of work, the long, slow pull, the grip that does not slip, the application of force to a problem that cannot be rushed. And in that specific category, it was not just better than what Daniel Hargrove had available to him. It was the only thing that worked. There are problems in this world that respond to speed and horsepower and the latest engineering. And there are problems that respond only to patience and torque and the willingness to line up at the right angle and pull until something moves. The mistake, the one that cost Daniel Hargrove 3 days and a Nashville recovery bill and very nearly a $500,000 machine, was assuming that the first category and the second category were the same category. Dale Hutto knew the difference. He had known it for 87 years. He had kept a machine in working condition for 24 years against the day when that knowledge would matter to someone who needed it. Right now, there is something in your life that the expensive solution has not fixed, and the credentialed experts have assessed as beyond practical extraction. Right now, there is knowledge somewhere, in a shed, in a journal, in the memory of someone older than the problem, that the people running the job site have not thought to ask about. The oil pull was 6 miles down the road the whole time. It took a 22-year-old laborer named Marcus Webb and 4 words to find it. If this story made you think about what is sitting 6 miles down your own road, I need you to do 3 things. Subscribe to this channel, because every week we find the stories that were 6 miles down the road from where everyone was looking. Leave a comment and tell me, what has the expensive solution failed to fix in your life? And did you ever find the answer somewhere nobody expected? and share this with someone who is standing right now at the edge of their own swamp, watching their own excavator sink, convinced they have run out of options. They haven't run out of options. They just haven't called Dale Hutto yet.